It seems the more information we learn about the co-pilot and procedures on board commercial jets, the more questions arise. We have drawn together a few from our viewers and followers online, and we're going to put them to aviation attorney Arthur Rosenberg. He is also a pilot and an engineer and joins us from New York. Mr. Rosenberg, thanks so much for your time today. So first I want to start with one of the questions we received on our CBC Facebook page. So Kyle is asking, mental health assessments for all pilots prior to takeoff? Arthur, I gather what this questioner is getting at here is, might that be where we are heading? What would you say?
Well, mental health assessments are conducted on a very rudimentary, basic level once or twice a year when a pilot goes for his physical exam. The medical examiner is supposed to note anything significant, but importantly, and the FAA in America and also in Canada makes clear that they are not doing a formal psychiatric evaluation, and that's very important. So if on the application, on the physical examination, it's noted by the doctor, if he happens to get to it, that the pilot has psychosis, severe depression, he would identify that and report it and fail the applicant. And then there's a separate procedure, even if you do have depression, even if you take Prozac or some other meds, for a special issuance certificate to be issued so you can fly. But most of the time, these things are concealed by the pilots and not disclosed on the annual or biannual application for permission to fly.
So just further to that question, do you think we might see that change, that we might see mental health assessments closer to the time of takeoff going forward?
Well, you know, the way I want to answer that question is prior to the time of takeoff. That's not really practical, but I do believe that mental health assessments in detail should be performed once or twice a year, most likely commensurate with the time of the physical examination. And I do believe that the airline should go back to the model of old, where there was an in-house flight surgeon and they took more direct responsibility for the physical and mental health of their pilots. They don't do it anymore. You know, that's kind of been farmed out and left to the individual pilots to get the necessary approvals. And that's kind of putting the person who may be ill in control as the point where the funnel through which all information goes, and that's exactly what you don't want.
Interesting. Right. Almost along the lines of a team surgeon, a professional sports team might have, or a team doctor rather. Let's move on to question number 2 from Sep. This is one coming to us on Twitter. If there's international reform giving flight crew access to the cockpit, will they require psychological screening? And has Air Canada thought this through? So Arthur, here referring to the fact Air Canada announced yesterday, effective immediately, there will have to be 2 people in that cockpit. So if we are talking about a flight attendant being that second person, could or should they now be subject to some kind of mental or health assessments?
Yeah, that's actually a very good question. I would say this, that flight attendants have had access to cockpits, you know, almost since the time of the Wright brothers in some form or another. I would think in today's day and age, things being what they are, that flight attendants should have some interview process just to confirm that they're fit to do their duties of flight attendants. But I think you have to differentiate between someone who has within arm's reach access to the flight controls of an airplane and someone who's standing, you know, 3 or 4 feet behind them in the area, you know, maybe serving, you know, coffee or tea or what have you, and watching. Mm-hmm. So the answer is yes, I do, but certainly not to the same level as the flight crew.
Mm-hmm. Certainly that question, you know, begs more detail as to what exactly the training would be for that second person in the event that a flight attendant did need to take action. What might they be able to do? So that's something we'll be asking going forward as that is implemented. Let's go to question 3 from CBC News.ca. Aren't medical doctors in Canada and the U.S. required to report relevant medical conditions of commercial airline pilots to government authorities? You've touched on this, the fact that you say in many cases it would be up to the pilot, and why would anyone really want to disclose personal information about them that may indicate that they are unstable?
So first off, let's just answer the question that was sent in. The answer is yes. Doctors who perform the annual and the biannual physical examinations are absolutely required to report any significant medical findings in the application. And if any one of a myriad of conditions exist, including mental illness, they are required to identify it, report it, and deny the applicant his medical so he can fly. But when that happens, there's a separate procedure where the applicant actually can get referred to a mental health care provider. And even a person taking Prozac or some other medication with depression under proper supervision and medical clearance can still get a special issuance medical certificate and fly and perform their privileges as an airman. It's an interesting dichotomy. And I will say this, I think it puts the medical examiner, the doctor who is not a mental health care provider, in a very awkward position. And it's almost asking him to make judgments that they're not qualified to make. So I think that those two things should be separated, the physical and the mental, and each one deserves its own special care of treatment by a trained professional.
All right, Arthur, one more for you. This one coming to us from CBC News.ca asking, is it logical to allow anyone to have sole access to the cockpit of a passenger plane while in flight? Didn't 9/11 change how we think? And I believe, Arthur, that many people would in fact be surprised to hear that as of now, and in this particular case, there are airlines in which one person is allowed to have complete control like that.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's why we're talking today, because Germanwings and Lufthansa's practice, which was not unique. It was pretty much emulated by most of the European carriers. Some did it differently. Even in Canada, my understanding is some carriers did it differently. They had two in the cockpit. But as we all know now, to the credit of your transport minister yesterday, she issued an order mandating two in the cockpit. The thing with 9/11, though, is interesting. 9/11 actually mandated the secure cockpit door, the vault-like door that we all know now. It's bulletproof. It's supposed to be designed to withstand a professional football player, linebacker, running at Olympic breakneck speed into the door and not fall down, which it does. Axes, it's pretty much impenetrable. But that was only one side of the formula. The other side of the formula, which the protocols were followed in the United States by U.S. carriers, was the two-person in the cockpit at all times, which, for reasons discussed, it just makes sense. It provides a deterrent, keeps an extra set of eyes on each other. If one pilot got sick, for example, the other one could just open the door and let the other pilot in. And it's almost like a security guard mentality. Just the mere fact that someone is there serves as a deterrent effect from doing ill will.
It's fascinating, and we have so many questions and so little time, so we have to leave it there. I appreciate your time on this. Thank you. Aviation attorney Arthur Rosenberg with me from New York, and I want to thank those of you who did tweet us your questions. Certainly the kinds of questions that we here at CBC News Network will be asking in the days to come about this tragedy.